If you've been following the channel and also my socials for a while, you'll know that I am a big fan of Squier, especially as a modding platform. And people often reach out to me asking what my favorite of the Squier offset guitar releases is. And I would have to say that this, unfortunately, limited run 40th Anniversary Jazzmaster, which is now out of production, has to be my favorite. Now, this guitar comes with a poplar body in a satin urethane finish in this really gorgeous desert sand color. It also comes with a satin finished maple neck, which is really, really smooth, and fans of the Mascus Squier Jazzmaster will feel right at home with this neck. It also has a bone nut as well as narrow, tall frets and a 9.5-inch radius. This has a slightly wider nut width at 1.685 inches instead of the standard 1.65 or 42 millimeter nut width. It's got a nice back profile to the neck, not too chunky and not too slim. I'd say it's a bit slimmer actually than those found on the Vintera Jazz Masters or even some of the Japanese Jazz Masters that have been coming out with those U-necks. So it's really, really comfortable in hand to play. This also comes with this nice and classy looking anodized gold aluminum pickguard, which helps to tame some of the 60 cycle hum that you get with Jazzmaster single coil pickups. Under the hood, you've got your standard budget Squier Jazzmaster wiring. That is your PVC coated wiring, as well as import mini pots. The electronics themselves are fine. They do not cause any issues or anything, but they're not my favorite to work on, especially when you're soldering, because they can get in the way. They melt really, really easily. But for me, if I owned this guitar, that would not be one of the priority upgrades. The pickups that come in these, I personally have found that the bridge pickup is just a little bit too hot, wound at about 11K, and makes it just a little bit too mid-heavy for me, and definitely would be the pickup that I would swap out if I were to upgrade these pickups. Now, the neck pickup is wound closer to vintage specs in the high 6K to lower 7K range on most of these, and that is definitely passable for a vintage style Jazzmaster tone. But if you have money at some point down the line for upgrades, I definitely do recommend upgrading these pickups if you want a sound that is closer to that vintage Jazzmaster tone. Now, on the hardware front, these did come with an Age vibrato system. As you can see here, it's a little bit overdone, but it's got kind of, a steampunkish kind of vibe to it. And these also came with a Mustang style bridge that was also aged. Now, the stock bridges that come on these are actually quite good. They have that 52 millimeter string spacing, which keeps your low and high E away from the edges of the fretboard, which is a problem when you try to install just any run-of-the-mill Mustang bridge. But that does come with a little caveat. Unfortunately, the tolerances for the little height adjustment grubs are not the tightest, and so applying a little bit of Loctite to the little height adjustment grubs goes a long way in helping keep the bridge at the height that you set it to and prevents it from lowering over time. But this one has been upgraded with one of these Bensonite offset bridges. This bridge is actually really, really fantastic, especially when you consider that they are $125 shipped. You can get them on Bensonite's website as well as on Reverb. Unlike some of the other premium bridge designs, This one here is made to be a rocking style bridge. Now, what makes this bridge a bit more special than your typical Mustang bridge is that it is milled from a solid block of brass, as you can see. So it's a bit thicker, which helps in the sustain department. It also is designed in such a way to keep these saddles from ever actually moving. So it is a really, really tight fit to keep those saddles together, no gaps in between the saddles. And the saddles themselves, unlike your typical Mustang bridge, which usually have like nickel plated or chrome plated brass saddles, these are stainless steel saddles, which help to retain some of the original Jazzmaster and Jaguar tone. These saddles are a bit more oversized than your typical Mustang bridge saddles, and in addition, they feature extra deep grooves to ensure that your strings do not pop out while playing. The Bensonite bridge is also fairly unique in that it is both a rocking as well as locking design. Now, unlike your typical Mustang or Stay Trem or even Mastery bridge, these do not feature bridge posts for their legs and instead have these threaded screws which can also be locked down. Once you have set your bridge to the height that you like, you can then tighten these nylon tipped little grubs that are on either side of the bridge, which help to prevent it from lowering itself over time. I also should mention that the legs or the screws that you use to adjust the height of the bridge are a lot bigger than the standard height adjustment grubs that you find on a Mustang bridge. And that extra width and that wider conical shape at the end of these screws helps to better prevent the bridge from straying forward or backward. One other thing that I should mention is that these saddles, as you can see here, have kind of a matte finish to them, and that is because they have been bead blasted, and that is by design to help, especially the bass strings, to actually catch the saddles rather than glide above them. So just know that if you do get one of these bridges, its design is intended for this bridge to be rocking. You shouldn't be wrapping the legs of these with any sort of tape or grommets or anything to lock them down because these saddles are designed to have a bit of friction to them so that when you are using your vibrato, that it actually does rock back and forth. So, yeah, don't tape them up. Don't put lube in the saddle slots because that is not how this bridge is supposed to work. And one other thing that I did want to mention is that this is a drop-in replacement. So unlike a mastery bridge, for example, you do not need to install proprietary thimbles, which is a pain in the butt for a lot of people. They do not have the tools nor the skills to execute that kind of mod without first bringing it to a tech. And so that is awesome because you can get this bridge, drop it right in, set it up, and play without any additional hurdles. It seems like the folks over at Bensonite have really gone the distance to try to solve, in a very thoughtful way, the most common problems that plague your standard stock offset guitar bridges, especially ones that come installed on these more budget tier models. I think that you will instantly notice a difference, an increase in sustain from that solid block of brass as the bridge base. And while stainless steel saddles are normally quite bright, I feel like in combination with that brass block, it gives you a nice, nuanced, multi-dimensional tone that does a good job of retaining the sparkle and tone of the original Jazzmaster bridge while also improving upon it. And yeah, I mean, for the money, it is hard to beat this one as far as bridge upgrades go. Now, going back to the Squier 40th Anniversary Jazzmaster, I really hope that at some point Fender release this as just one of the models in their roster because again, it is fantastic. I know not everybody is into a full maple neck because it is quite different from the traditional look and aesthetics. Also, a maple neck does make the tone of a guitar just a bit brighter. But for me, as compared to a lot of the ugly, at least in my opinion, ugly Laurel fretboards that I have seen on some of the classic vibe guitars and also even some of the more recent J Mascus Jazzmasters. I really like the look and feel of this semi-gloss or satin finished maple neck. It did need some work after getting it in, unfortunately, like with necks from all different price points, whether they are maple or rosewood or laurel or whatever. This did come with quite a bit of fret sprout, and those sharp fret edges made it quite uncomfortable to play when I first got it out of the box. So I definitely had to do a full fret dressing on this thing. And after doing that, it definitely feels like a lot more premium of an instrument. One of the reasons why I recommend this over, say, a J Mascis Jazzmaster is that I just prefer the vintage specs of this. I like the fact that it does not have the moved up vibrato. And I like the fact that it's got a traditional rocking bridge kind of setup. So whether I want to install a mastery or one of these Bensonite bridges or a stay trem, I don't need to do a lot of additional steps, such as what I have to do with replacing the tunematic grubs or bushings in one of the J Mascis models. And yeah, it just makes doing a bridge upgrade that much easier. And while the pickups in these may not be the best vintage style Jazzmaster pickups, as I'd mentioned before, they get you into the ballpark closer than the Mascus guitars because the ones in the J Mascus model are more like P90s than a traditional Jazzmaster pickup. You could even get away with just replacing the bridge pickup on this if you don't want one that is so hot. But as I said before, it wouldn't be a priority upgrade for me if I were to own this guitar and want to upgrade it myself. The order in which I would do the upgrades would probably be to replace the janky stock vibrato first. The best setup that I would say to get these, if you're using 10s or 11s, is to have that collet sitting about 3/4 of an inch proud of the vibrato plate here. That is typically how I set them on a well-calibrated AVRI tremolo, and that ensures that your guitar isn't going out of tune because the spring tension is far too little nor far too much, both of which can lead to stability and tuning issues. And then after I upgraded the vibrato, I would probably then upgrade at minimum the bridge pickup because as I said before, it's just a bit too hot for me. And then from there, I would upgrade the bridge, even though the stock bridge is perfectly fine so long as you add a bit of Loctite. You definitely hear the advantages and improvements when you install a bridge like the Bensonite bridge, especially if you want more sustain and you want more harmonic complexity to the tone of your guitar. The next thing I would probably upgrade would be the tuners. The tuners on these aren't the best. They're just economy tuners. They're not even made by Ping. Just know that if you do want to install Goto tuners or Kluson vintage style tuners on this, you are going to have to remove the existing bushings as they are just a little bit too small to install those kinds of upgraded tuners. And then the last thing that I probably would upgrade is the wiring. Again, you've got your mini pots. They're made by Alpha and plenty of pedal makers, for example, amp makers use Alpha pots and they're perfectly fine. To be honest, this would be the very, very last thing that I would upgrade on this guitar is the electronics because they're pretty solid as is. The main motivation behind wanting to upgrade, it'd be easier to work on if you plan to do a lot of mods, because if you use Gavit pushback wire or like cloth covered wiring, it just makes the job a lot cleaner and easier, and you do not have a lot of these additional strands coming off of your wiring that makes it more complicated than it should be. And to improve the 60 cycle hum, I would probably also install either the brass fender shielding plates or copper foil shielding, because the shielding paint in this guitar doesn't do the best job. And while the anodized aluminum guard does a fantastic job of helping to tame 60 cycle hum and unwanted noises, with that inferior shielding paint, you unfortunately don't get the best kind of Faraday cage effect. And yeah, even before upgrading the wiring, the next to last thing I probably would do would be to upgrade the shielding inside of the guitar, again, with brass plates or copper foil shielding. Closing in the way that we often do with these offset guitar reviews, is this guitar worth it? Now, these guitars, when they came out, were among some of the most expensive Squiers ever released. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head how much they were, and if I'm not mistaken, they were either $5.99 or even $6.99 when they came out, and they are not super easy to find on the used market. You'll find them every now and again, but if you take a look on Reverb, for example, right now, people are trying to charge a premium for these, sometimes listing them stock at over $700, which is nutty. I think that they also were blowing these out at maybe $4.99 or even less when they were trying to get rid of the remaining stock. So definitely look out for deals. If you see one of these in the $300 to $400 price point, pound for pound, they are better than the classic vibe Jazzmasters that are out there. And also, if you're into vintage style specs, these are definitely better than even the J Mascus models. Anyway, I think that about does it for this guitar. I hope you enjoyed the video, especially if you've been on the hunt for the perfect budget Jazzmaster. If you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell to be notified of new videos as soon as they drop. It helps this teeny tiny channel to grow. And don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars buying tips.